That again.
Hello,
Hello.
everyone.
That was just a practice run.
Yes.
That trial run. Hey,
Glad
everybody.
to have you with us this evening.
It's been a couple weeks. You know, I got a lot of details here you got to remember. So
Yes.
welcome. Glad to see everybody. Glad to be back connected up again with you. Welcome to Conversations with Pam and David.
Yes.
We're back with you. It's been a couple weeks. You had
It
a
has.
couple weeks off.
It has,
For a
yes.
couple reasons. I don't know if I remember why now. Other than
We
being
are
exhausted.
just busy. Our lives are consumed with so many things to do.
Yeah, there were a couple things going
Yeah,
on
we're taking
here and
care of a
there.
lot of details,
Lot
a
of
lot of
stuff.
things we have to get in place and get in order.
Yeah. So
Yes.
part of what you got to do.
It's part of the process.
So yeah, we had a few things a couple weeks there where we took off and tried to get some things together, handle a few things and whatnot, and we're back. We had Thanksgiving in there. Is that one of the reasons why?
That's one of the reasons.
Thanksgiving
Wednesday,
was in there.
yes.
Yeah. And so we were working all that week actually.
Yes.
Very much so.
A
so
lot.
that was a busy week, and the week before that, something else was going on, and
Yes.
so stuff has been going on. But like everybody else, everybody's got stuff going on, right?
Yes, exactly.
So glad that you would take the time to connect up with us. Want to invite you to take a minute to share with somebody who might want to get involved. There's a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things that have been going on, both locally and elsewhere. And so I want to take a few minutes to give everybody a chance to deflate and vent and get it out your system, whatever
Exactly.
the case may be.
Let's talk about
let's
it.
get it out there and let's get it going, get it rocking here.
Yes.
So, hope everybody has been doing well. Once again, I want to remind you, this Conversations, we're here every Saturday, just about every Saturday, mostly every Saturday.
Yes.
Holidays are coming up. We'll actually be gone a few weeks for the holidays, but we're here most of the time on Saturdays.
Yes, we are.
And, kind of keeping things rolling and keeping things current to what is going on. There is something I want to show you, which is kind of a new little tool that we have, which is pretty cool. This ties into all of our social media, different types of sites and activities that we have. If you're not aware of them, we have many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 8. I think there's more we've added.
Yes.
Different social media types of things that are happening that you can tap into, all with all kinds of information for you, things that you can learn about, hear about from the church, things for the kids. There's things here for the adults. The archive of all of our past sermons in Destiny Preparation Church YouTube page. Conversations, we have a YouTube page, by the way. You can come to the Conversations page and check out all of our archives there. So if you miss us for a couple weeks, we don't want you to feel lonely. So we'll
can
send
always,
you,
yes.
you can always check out one of the old ones.
Yes,
And
or
then-
you can revisit something
right.
that you have already watched.
Topic, exactly.
A topic, and if you want to get a better clarification sometimes, you can go through and revisit that.
Genova said, "How dare y'all take time off?" Oh man! Oh, make us feel important now. Oh man!
Make us feel guilty as
Right.
well.
Oh, we are glad to be back. Glad to see you too.
Yes.
Man. Glad to see you. So you can either type in the URL down here at the bottom that says campsite.bio/DPC. You just go into any web browser and type that in, campsite.bio/DPC. And it'll take you to this, or if you've got a phone right now that you can take a picture or scan QR code, the QR code is right there, and you can hit that. That way, you'll always you can actually, you get some time on your hand. You want to play around.
Yes.
You can see our Instagram account. You can see our YouTube pages, all 3 of them. You can see our Facebook pages. The Jail Scholarship Program is out there. Our international page we're going to be talking about more over the next few weeks as well,
Yes.
because there's a lot of things coming up on the international scene over the next few weeks. So stay tuned for more information on that. Again, I mentioned you can go to our YouTube page as well and subscribe to the YouTube page. If you
Yes.
subscribe to the YouTube page, then you'll get a notice every time we upload one of our former weeks. So glad to have you connected. And, glad to have you involved with what's happening. So lots has been going on.
A lot.
We missed a few things in the past few weeks.
Yes, we did.
That was the one thing about not doing the show I didn't like, because there's so many things that have been happening.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, we need to talk about some of this stuff.
Exactly.
And but now we have to try and kind of squeeze a bunch of it in,
Yes.
all at the same time. There were 2 major cases that we were following over the past several weeks now. The whole country was following. to see what the responses would be and what would happen to them. One was the Ahmaud Arbery case,
Exactly.
and seeing what was going to happen with that group. And then there was
Yes.
also the Kyle Rittenhouse case.
Yes.
And wanted to see how that was going to go. Each of these cases really tests kind of the perspectives, the persuasions of where our culture and communities are at.
Where it is, and hopefully where it is going.
Going and moving.
Hopefully we're moving towards some type of change.
Or from, either
yeah,
way. But
yes.
it's like
Positive change.
there is the legal
Hopefully.
aspects of someone on trial, but then there's also the principal aspect, because they're allegedly being judged by a jury of their peers.
Yes.
Which represents their community, their living environment. And so the if you will, the tenor of that group, of that area, it's a test of where that culture stands on certain things, opinions, how their feelings are, how they're swayed. And we saw two very interesting cases here. Again, there's part of it that's an aspect of the legality. Can you truly prove that somebody is guilty?
Right.
But then there's also the interpretation of, is what they did warrant a certain crime or not? And in this case, we had two different cases, both of which were based, the defense, on self-defense.
On self-defense, exactly. Both cases.
And so looking at how self-defense was treated under those two different scenarios is actually an interesting test to see where public opinions are. Because again, this is 12 representative of your community. So where's
Right.
public opinion? And you could take the same case in one state in the country,
Right.
and it could be very different
In another
in
state.
another state, partially because of culture, partially because of the way the rules
The law
or the
is
laws
written,
have been
yes.
written.
Exactly. Written and have not been changed. Some of the laws are actually antiquated.
That's true.
That need to be changed.
And that's certainly one impact of
Exactly.
it. And then also just some of the nuances. What is it? Murder is not the same in every state.
No.
Right? What it takes to because they're defined.
What it takes.
Well, what does it mean to murder one versus murder two,
and
or
murder
malice
three.
murder, or all these other?
Yes.
I used to think when I
Murder
was
with intent.
When I was young, I
Yes,
thought there was I thought there was
premeditated
murder. Right? There's
Yes.
murder. There's
And this
premeditated murder.
Yes.
Maybe there's manslaughter.
Yes.
But now
All
you
that.
see all this around the country, and
Yes.
there's this kind of murder. There's so many different
Yes.
definitions
Exactly.
of murder.
Exactly.
Right? Even just that. So where this takes place
Intentional intent.
has a very specific impact on how it's going to be evaluated, judged, et cetera, so forth. And so, two really interesting cases here. Let's talk about Kyle first.
okay.
Rittenhouse. So this particular case, again, a rather interesting case. This is a young man. He's 18 now. I think he was 17 when this happened. And most of us know the story at this point. They were having these kind of standouts that were happening outside.
It was a Black Lives Matter
Right. There
rally.
were
is what it
rallies
was.
that were going on
Exactly.
because a man who had been shot by the police. And so there were people that were out in the streets. They were out in the streets for probably a couple of different weeks.
Yes.
And so there were certain people, and we saw this in a few different cases, where all of a sudden these people with militia come in who aren't police officers.
Exactly.
But they feel for whatever reason that they need to come into the area to help keep the peace.
Peace and to protect
Right.
their community.
And they're claiming that people have called them in
Yes.
to help with protecting the peace. And so they may or may not be rightful gun owners. In this case, he really wasn't, because he was
wasn't.
underage.
He was underage. He was a minor.
Right?
Yes.
And so he shows up here with a rifle, and he is...
that someone else purchased.
Heather in ATL.
Hey, Heather.
What's
in
going
Atlanta.
on?
Yes.
And yes.
Glad you made it safe.
In
I'll get back.
probably much warmer than it is here in Atlanta. I would hope so.
Yes,
actually,
yes.
Because it's a little chilly here.
Yeah, it
Heather, you
is.
left at a good time.
Just a little bit.
But so you got Kyle, who has 17-year-old, doesn't have a permit for a gun, supposedly shows up in response to this call, even though he's really not qualified to do it.
Right.
He's supposed to be there allegedly to help with some car dealership.
Right.
But that's not where he was. He was supposed to be there for medical support, as I recall.
Yes.
But that's not what he's doing. And so in the midst of this, he's carrying a gun around, a rifle around, And, here's where the story becomes opinionated, right?
Right.
Did he provoke something, or did he respond to something that they needed to do to save his life? And there was a lot of interesting questions
It was
there.
probably both. Well, go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of interesting questions there of, it's like, what's the causation? And how does causation
Right.
define self-defense?
Exactly.
Right? If you provoke a situation, can you then claim self-defense if
Right.
somebody attacks you?
Exactly.
Right?
Well, yeah, this is very true.
And so, you got into the finites of the third guy of the three who actually pointed a gun in his direction as well. So now, do I defend myself by shooting? And that's a whole nother story we're going to
Yes.
get to about everybody now having a gun out on the street.
Right.
And the risk of that. We'll get to that as we go. So you got into all this stuff. Bottom line, the jury finds him not
guilty. Exactly. Also, the person that was actually killed,
Two.
he wasn't there. Yeah, they were not there to be able to give their side of the
But
story.
we had a lot of video.
A lot of video.
Had a lot of video, and of course, they do everything they can to try and present different people in different ways. So, like the first guy that actually was shot by Kyle, they were saying, well, he was being aggressive elsewhere already. He was an aggressive kind of guy, and so, but I go back to the issue of a young person who is not qualified to handle a firearm, maybe trained, but not qualified, obviously not legally handling one,
Right.
shows up with a
With
rifle in his hands out on the street.
AR-15, yes.
Something about that tells me, it's an accident waiting
To happen. Yes.
Right? A young man doesn't know how to have the right composure with a gun, doesn't know how and when, it may know how to shoot one, but in terms of knowing how and when to defer, how and when he should actually use it
Right.
versus not. There's a big difference, at least there should be, in how his understanding of how to treat a gun in a situation versus, for example, a trained police officer. A trained police officer is supposed to
Exactly.
not utilize their gun unless it's not just a deterrent, it's a kind of a final scenario. It's the last resort.
Right.
So could some of this been avoided? Is there an issue with him being there in that state, in that stance with a gun? So maybe it's not murder, but there's got to be something.
It has to be something because he did take 2 lives, and he also injured a person. He blew his arm actually apart.
Yeah, and
so I mean, he needs to, in my opinion, where's the accountability?
Well, that's the question. Is there a rule? Is there a law for that? Right? First of all, is there a law, or should there be a law that says, look, if you don't have a permit, if you're not licensed, why are you out here with a gun?
With a gun.
And should you not be arrested for that? Typically,
well, you know what? When the judge threw out the fact that he was a minor with a gun,
Right.
I knew that
Yeah,
he was getting
problematic.
off. That was a problem.
But
Yes.
you would think that there would be, there's typically a severity of charges, and that was in that case. Yeah, I don't know what the exact specific charge was. I'm assuming it was for him having a gun as a minor, right? And
that was dismissed.
For that to get thrown out is kind of an issue, right?
Yes.
Because there's got to be some accountability for something. Listen, son, you should not have been out there.
Yes.
With an AR-15 on the streets in the middle of a riot.
In the middle of a riot.
Right, carrying this gun around.
Right.
That is asking
for a
trouble.
problem. That's a
asking
problem.
for
That's
somebody
problematic.
to feel threatened, for somebody to feel offended, et cetera, so forth and so on.
Well, do you think that the people that attacked him, do you think they attacked him for absolutely no reason at all? Or did they attack him because he was shooting people?
I don't know.
That was a question.
But that's a question.
That is the question that was not answered.
Was there something in his behavior that got people feeling like,
that
look,
he was a threat?
Obviously, the third guy, clearly,
Right.
he felt he was a threat. That's why he had his gun. But he didn't shoot his.
Right.
He shot his, and they say it's okay for him to shoot his because he pointed it at me in a threatening way, which I don't know if he necessarily pointed in a threatening way. He pulled it out. But this again goes back to my concern about folks deciding, okay, because there's guns out on the street, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get a gun.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get out on the street. And now you have people, pointing at each other with guns.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing in the streets right now, by the way, with
It
young
is.
people.
Exactly.
Right? Everybody else got to have a gun. I'm going to have a
Right.
gun too. That doesn't necessarily make it any better or any safer.
Right.
Right?
It,
Now
it
you got
really
bullets
doesn't.
going both ways, and you got bullets going through houses, and you got all kind of crazies because, the whole idea of people just deciding, I don't care if you're legal, if you're trained, et cetera, so forth, in the heat of the moment, right? When the pressure's on, when you got a crowd, even with like Kyle, you're out there, you're inexperienced, and you got a crowd of people all around you.
Yes.
And some of them are more testy than others.
Well, I kind of agree with Genovo that it could possibly have been premeditated. He found a time or an opportunity that he can go out with a gun. When I watched it on TV, it seemed like a one of those videos, one of those video games. You're running through the dark with this rifle. He's falling to his knees and he's shooting people. It could possibly have been. Well, I mean, why would you go out there with the naked?
That was one of the questions that happened offline. What is your intent?
What is your intent?
If you're going out there, your mindset has to be something. I'm going out there to keep the peace.
Because
somebody might try something.
Right.
I'm ready for it.
I'm ready.
Right?
I have my rifle.
And
my
so
gun.
it turns into somebody tried something. It was self-defense.
Right.
But they tried something because you went out there and aggravated the crowd by having this gun.
Right. And you shot people.
Now I'm assuming they get into points like, okay, was he waving it around? Was he shooting it in there? Was he swinging it at people, threatening? Then it would have been more blatant. And actually, he did a really interesting, it was interesting watching him on the stand. And that was kind of unexpected. But actually, they say now, in a case like this for self-defense, it's actually pretty common because they have to tell why they felt they were in a situation to be threatened.
Right.
And, I watched parts of it. I didn't watch it all. But parts of what he said, it was like he was very well trained in what to say and not to say. And he was actually very good at steering.
Very well rehearsed.
Most people are not, but he was very conscious and careful about what he said and didn't say. And you have to be, because in a situation like that, you can fall into a trap very easily as a defendant that gets used against you. So they did a very good job of preparing him. And, and so you could hear from the commentators, the lawyers around it, that was a major turning point in the case because of how he represented himself. Remember, it's got to be, beyond the shadow of doubt, right? Or beyond, what is it? What's the standard again? Oh, gosh, I'm not having it tonight. He has to be proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Right?
Yes.
And so for him, if he can show why he reasonably felt he was threatened, then that beats the case, right? And so for him to come up and say, look, this is how I perceive the situation.
They were chasing me. Why were they chasing you?
I was there doing what I was supposed to be doing, and these people were coming at me, and I had seen this guy being aggressive over there, and I thought he was going to come and take my gun, and he was going to do this. That is the way that you create that reasonable doubt of murder and it being self-defense, because it's a matter of how he perceived the situation.
Right.
Now, didn't work quite that way in Ahmaud Arbery's situation.
Exactly.
But, in the case of this, in Kyle's case, they did not have, again, it doesn't mean that he didn't do anything wrong, but they did not have enough to push over the edge of saying, look, you aggravated this situation, so it can't be self-defense. That was the real question. Right? Did you aggravate the situation? Well, they said the first guy, he was already aggravated. I had nothing to do with that. He was already jumping, acting crazy, right? The third guy, I didn't hear much about the second guy, but the third guy, he pointed a gun at me. So, hey, what was I supposed to do? He pointed at me. I shot before he did. So that's just bum luck on his side. So there's that there wasn't enough to push the jury to say that it was unreasonable for him to have responded in that way. But what they missed in doing that, because it really wasn't tied to those charges, is, was it reasonable for him to be out there with that gun in the first place?
Yes.
When they dropped that charge, that earlier charge, the question is, why are you out there? Why are your 17-year-old non-permitted self out there with a gun on the streets in the middle of a riot?
And wasn't he also in a different state than he actually lived in?
I think he did cross state lines.
He crossed state lines, and his mother drove him there.
Drove across straight lines with an illegal gun. So there
Yes.
could be federal charges. But then, now the post thing, last thing on this one, the post after all of this, right, is he now gets touted around by all these political authorities.
Trump.
I was going to say his name, but that's one of them. Just one of them.
Just one.
To express the freedom of bearing arms and the freedom, and nobody says, "Boy, what was you doing out there?"
Exactly.
17-year-old with a gun in the middle of the street in the middle of a riot.
They should have questioned his mother as well.
Yeah. So now he becomes this kind of poster child. To go around, and actually for an 18-year-old, he's fairly well spoken. So you gotta love it, right?
Yes.
But it's amazing how all these things become political and push and sway, So and obviously that's a 5 minutes of fame type of deal, but people will use this in such agenda. It's crazy. Yeah, thank you, Janelle, for this comment. So one of the things that wasn't spoken about, as Kyle said, he was being chased. They were chasing him because he was assaulting a young lady. So I don't know. Somehow
Well,
that didn't really come out.
There's a population of people that are quite disturbed by Kyle Rittenhouse not being convicted.
Sure there are.
They are. Because, I'm sorry, I got to talk about race. Had he had a different paint job, had he been a person of color, I don't believe he would have gotten off.
Well, that a lot of people say, how is this a racial issue, right? And that is, one of the statistical issues that, someone, a person of color in the same kind of situation. Now, you can't prove exactly because we're not living that. But statistics seem to show that a person of color in a similar type of situation would be deemed differently. Because remember, again, it's based on peers of your community.
Right.
And if your community has a different perception, then they might look at the same thing, and their perception might make them think, well, no, this isn't reasonable because I suspect blah, blah, blah. Versus in this case, you go with assumption of perception to say, yeah, well, he's a young kid. He's innocent. He wasn't really trying to start no trouble.
Exactly. He was Johnny was a good boy.
And so, there are perceptions there that impact decisions in judgment.
Yes.
And it's the goal, the responsibilities of the lawyers to try and break through those perceptions and say, look, here's the case, here's the facts. And we need to treat this on an equal basis, but it's not always realistically.
It really
easy
isn't.
To do that.
And if you watch the case and if you listen to the judge, he seemed to already have a biased opinion. You kind of figured what angle he was taking and where it was going.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is one extreme.
And a lot of people complained about him.
Absolutely. So this is one extreme of the spectrum, right? Kyle, self-defense, found not guilty. And that was in Kenosha. Is that in Wyoming?
That's Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Or Milwaukee.
Well, Kenosha's outside of Milwaukee,
right.
In Wisconsin.
Yes, Wisconsin.
So that's in the Northwest in Milwaukee. And then we have the case in Georgia, right?
Wow.
That everybody was suspecting, unfair play.
Yes.
That there was certainly, we saw that the accused in that case, it took 72 days for them to even be arrested for charges to be. And at first they told them while they were bloody, while they were still, I'm seeing you, Genova, I'm seeing you. While they were still had blood on their hands, and shh, we ignore now.
Genova, yes, exactly. He remembered the back of the bus.
Okay, so all right, moving on here. So while they were still on scene, blood all over them, et cetera, so forth. You have the the cops say, "I'll just go home and wash it." Wait a minute. Is there evidence that we need to gather here or something? Don't leave yet because we need to check out everything. They're going home, get washed up, get yourself cleaned up. I know this is a horrible experience for you.
Yes.
Clearly, they had a bias.
Yes.
In how they perceive the situation. And again, you only have one side of the story here, right? So you have these guys here saying, "Hey, it was terrible. We didn't want to do it. They was trying not to do the right thing."
Yes.
Blah blah blah. And they just feed in it. Again, you ask yourself, if this was reversed.
If it were, yes.
If there were 3 black men there and 1 white man did, as they were trying to do, some kind of citizen's arrest on him, you suspect highly that it would have been treated quite differently.
I
Perceptions
agree.
have a lot to do with it.
Yes.
At the same time, you go through the process. This does get processed. They go to case. Behave. That's right. Behave.
Noble, he doesn't want you to get me started.
Don't start that engine, buddy. Don't get it roaring here. I'll be in trouble. I gotta mute the mic. I don't have a delay button here.
We have a balance here, people.
So, in the midst of this case, you have 3 men. And, just before we get into any details, I think we both said this. This is no good thing for anybody in this case.
It really isn't.
The end result of this is tragic.
Really tragic.
Nobody
wins. Here we have a holiday. We have Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
These people, they're not home with their loved ones. Their loved ones have to experience and think about the seat at the table today. Thanksgiving, my son is not here. And then the family of the other people, Well, my family, they're in jail.
Yep. And of course, Ahmaud Arbery's
the
family has
and the
issues
Ronnies.
because their son's not home.
Their son's
and
not
won't
home.
be home, and they can't even go visit him in jail.
Exactly.
His life was snuffed out for no reason.
For no reason whatsoever.
It's a terrible situation.
Everybody's life is ruined.
Right.
And Roddy, had he stayed on his porch and made a phone call to the police, he would not be in jail practically for life right now.
Now that's the one where here we go.
Yes.
Here we go.
Exactly.
Right? Because my thing with him is, granted, he got in the middle of a situation
he knew
really
nothing
about.
He didn't even know the McMichaels.
And but from his perspective, I believe he thought he was doing the right thing. Right? I thought he goes, let me get the big cam. I got to get the big camera on so y'all can see this expression, right? He thought he was doing the right thing. And think about it. There are times when you do want citizens to get involved, right? In certain situations. Had that been a true criminal, he would have been praised for stopping this person, blah, blah, blah. He didn't know enough about what was going on.
He didn't.
The problem with
he
him
may
is
not even have known that they had a gun.
Listen, we have all kind of people going through this community right now, getting in cars.
Yes.
Right? You saw me chase one once.
Yes.
I was there booking at him.
Yes.
But somebody could see that.
Yes.
Right? And jump in with me, or they could sit from their porch and watch as I'm trying to chase this guy that has just been in my car.
Call the police.
At the same, but for them to have helped, if in my situation, right, people would have called them heroic for sacrificing themselves, getting involved in something, taking that risk to stop a criminal.
Yes.
Right? And so there's a risk either way. And especially if you don't really know what's going on. Certainly an option is to call the police, but that guy is getting away now.
Well, I understand what you're saying. But we also have to remember that this took place in Brunswick, Georgia, one of the last states to be desegregated. Also, that there were, as I say, 3 white men, a pickup truck, and shotguns, and a black man running.
Yeah. It looks bad.
It looks very, very bad. It looks bad. They could have done something differently. And this is where also the law of citizen's arrest has been changed in Georgia.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. Because it's so easily, citizen's arrest is so easily abused.
Again, you're not.
And it's antiquated.
Number one, you're not trained the same way.
You're not a police officer.
And it's funny because these guys had some training, but
and some,
realistically speaking,
they were not police officers.
Their training should have told them that they were overly responding
exactly
to this situation.
But see, this is something that has happened continually throughout the annals of history in states like Georgia. And they have gotten away with it. And obviously, they nearly got away with it because the district attorney
Wasn't even gonna.
She
it
wasn't.
took 4.
She
And
exactly.
finally, the state did it.
Exactly. She told the police officers not to arrest them.
You went through her, and then you had a second one,
You had a second
and a
one.
third one that
Exactly.
recused themselves.
Exactly.
And then the state finally stepped in and said, "Look, we're taking the case."
Exactly.
Right. And again, you go back to the judgment. Now, again, you're in Georgia.
You're in
you
Georgia.
have a jury of 11 white people.
Right.
Right. You would say everything is stacked against them being found guilty and for them being found innocent. It is a jury of peers. It's a white neighborhood, white people, white community. So you got a white, that's your peers.
Right.
And the question that comes up again is, how is it perceived by your community?
Right.
What they did, I mean, we have obviously our opinions, and we all will, but in your community, how do they perceive what they did? And they took a stand and unanimously voted that all 3 of them were guilty. Involved in this.
Yes.
Now, the third one, again, he's guilty by association.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
He didn't start the situation, but he ended up fully engaged in a situation that was out of control.
Out of control.
And,
he used his vehicle.
Right.
And they considered that as a weapon.
Now, listen, that aspect of it is no different than what we see when we see a bunch of young people hanging out together and one of them does something stupid.
Yes.
And then everybody that was with them becomes accountable for what they did.
Guilty by
they
association.
all go into a grocery store together. We friends hanging out.
Yes.
One of them decides, hey, I'm going to rob
the
store. Right?
You're with them.
The person behind the table has a heart attack, dies. Guess what? You are all
exactly, because they died, but for the fact that you caused them to have a heart attack.
Right. So that
because of your act.
So from that vantage point, there is accountability that this man did take on when he stepped into this situation and said, I'm trying to help my neighbors here to capture this criminal, and not really knowing what he was doing.
And they don't even know that he was a criminal.
Right. None of them
he stole nothing.
And the third guy is just going by what these guys are doing. They haven't even had a conversation.
They saw a young black man running.
Yep.
Basically. So, we
gotta stop him.
So we gotta stop him.
Right.
This is what we do
without
in Georgia.
Anybody asking a question. Genova just said it very clearly. He said, they call this into the dispatcher, and the dispatcher says, what was he doing? And he was like, well, he's running away.
He's running.
That's all we know. He's running.
He's running.
So therefore, we got to stop him. Look, if you guys come up with cars coming after me, right? And I don't know who you are.
And I don't know you.
And I'm in Georgia.
It got one in Georgia. People, shotguns and pickup trucks.
I'm running. I'm running.
You don't want to hear.
Run.
My mother is from Georgia. My mother was born in Georgia.
Where's
you
your
don't
mother?
want to
call in.
She
right
need to
now.
call in.
She need to call.
You don't want to hear what she has to say
your mama? Give her a
about
call.
those Georgia experiences. Once she left Georgia, she never went back.
Now what was that? What years? The 30s?
Yes.
30s?
Yes, it was.
Frame?
It was.
So
Exactly. My mom's
Georgia.
85, so
she lived in those time frames.
Exactly.
And I know we talked about some of the
things.
serious experiences that she had there. And as a result of some of them, her whole family never returned. And left everything they left. Had.
They had to run through the woods.
Right.
And they could see the house burning. Yes.
Right?
So she's had some experiences.
She's had some experiences there. And so, with a background culture, right? In that situation, I mean, I sympathize with the fact that, look, if somebody shows up, you just wandering through the neighborhood, and all of a sudden they want to stop. Hey, who are you? What are you doing? And they look like they're very aggressive, and they want to actually try and take you, or they, you can't blame him for running, because he doesn't know what he's about to be taken into.
What's going on? What's happening here?
And he's running for his life. And then the guy, the guy's like, well, he was trying to take my gun. Yeah, he's trying to take your gun.
You have a gun
because you're trying to point it at him, and he don't know if he's gonna shoot you. So he,
and the
guy's
young man
saying it's self-defense because I had to shoot him.
No,
Ahmaud is saying it's self-defense because you're trying to point a gun at me.
Exactly.
And so that goes back to the same thing we talked about in Kyle Rittenhouse. Can you proclaim self-defense if you have initiated the interaction? And so here they're chasing him down. They're coming at him 3 different ways. They're pulling out a gun on him. How do you say, well, it's self-defense now because you have provoked a situation with somebody who in fact, you have no evidence that they actually committed a crime? So and then on top of that, again, the jury that's there could still look at that and say, well, from their perspective, I understand they saw him running, they knew there were things going on in the area, I understand they were just trying to do the right thing. But the jury did not
Nope.
come to that verdict.
Yes.
Which is interesting. That's again speaks to culture and how the general culture is viewing things. Now, that one case doesn't say, okay, everything has changed and Georgia now as a state is fine, right? Or even that community is fine, frankly. But it does
But
say
they said they were protecting their community. But go ahead.
yeah, well, and so, but the fact that they would vote this, I mean,
Right.
granted, there's pressure that says the whole world is watching, and if we do say he's not guilty,
it's going to be a
we
mess.
know that's going to say something about our culture
Exactly.
too.
I mean,
our
that you know what?
community.
Watching the case, I mean, I watched it every day. I watched even when the police officers did arrive, and when they started interviewing and asking questions to Roddy and the McMichaels,
Yep.
the whole thing just sounds so biased and so racist. Because the officer was like, the black guy. Yeah, you mean the black guy. The black guy was running. I mean, it just seemed like it was just built around a black guy.
Racial aspects of
a
it.
racial aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly.
Also, that interview was not done correctly.
Well, they were
The investigation was not done
Right.
correctly, because when you investigate someone, you're not supposed to have the other parties present.
You should separate
You
them.
should
get
separate
their
them.
separate
And he
stories.
just exactly.
So I mean,
A lot of things were done
There was an
wrong.
inherent bias there.
Yes,
Right.
inherent.
In the situation.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that also speaks of the culture. Like you can
Yes.
say the jury speaks of the culture, but how the case was treated by the prosecutors
Exactly.
and by the police officers, that speaks about the culture. as well.
Exactly.
Because the people
And
who were in the jury pool really had a lot of and this was part of the defense argument. Realistically, they did have a lot of pressure to find him guilty, because to not find them guilty
Oh, they had pressure.
would imply that their community was okay with this kind of behavior.
Right, exactly, and
so,
they could not.
you
They
know-
could not. Then also, something else was that the defense attorney said he didn't want any more black pastors
Yeah,
in the courtroom. So guess what the brothers did?
Yeah, not just brothers.
Yeah,
brothers and
guess
sisters.
what
They all showed
pastors
up.
in the ministry.
Yeah.
Guess what they all did? They showed up.
Yes, they did.
They
Yes,
showed
they
up.
did.
Yes.
I have mixed feelings on that. Only again because there is a bias when you do that, and granted their intent is to push it over the intent is supposedly to make sure justice is done. But from that perspective, justice is these guys are found guilty because we've already perceived that they are guilty. It's really supposed to be for the jury to make an unbiased decision on that. So when you have people outside the courtroom making all kind of noise and saying all kind of stuff, it does add an inherent bias again on the other side to the whole process. So there may be some reasonable thought to saying, look, within X hundred feet of the courtroom, certain things shouldn't happen during a case, right? Now, they did make some moves at the very end, like when they went in to be sequestered and do the actual voting, they moved them from the outside edges of the building where they had windows they could see and hear how things went outside to the inner side of the building. So the judge made some adjustments according to situations like that. But realistically, I mean, if you truly want to keep things biased, I could see where they could reasonably. Now, I wouldn't say like he said, we don't want no more black pastors
that's what
up
he
in
said.
here. But
Yes.
I could see where number one, the judge could have said, okay, across the board, we're going to clear the courtroom, right? He could have said, we're not going to have. And again, they didn't come inside and make any noise, which is why the judge didn't stop them. It's not like they came in.
They just didn't want their presence there.
The point of the defense attorney, very poorly made, was just by them being there and them sitting there looking at the jury and the jury looking at them, knowing who they are, what they represent, it adds a certain aspect of influence. I could even see rationally why you could say within X hundred feet of the courthouse, we're not going to allow anybody who is exhibiting or demonstrating any kind of bias in the case. We want to keep it neutral.
Okay,
I could see that.
But why is it that when people of color stand and represent a cause that they feel like they're threatening people.
I could see it from either direction.
But they were being tried by a group of people that were not his peers.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is,
if
you made a law
look at
like
it both
that,
ways.
but if you made a law like that, you'd have to make it consistent across the board. It have to be the standard.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, the judge did the right thing.
Yeah, I think the
He
judge
did the right
overall
thing.
handled it.
He handled it
handled
right.
it appropriately.
Yeah,
But,
he handled all of the situations appropriately.
But the argument as made by the defense attorney was so poorly made, and it was so made again from that backdrop and background of where we come from. We got to get these black passes out of here.
Get them out of here,
You
right?
know,
Yes.
That was just very, very poorly done.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so they are his
they
clients
were trying.
there.
They were trying to do anything they could to claim a mistrial because that's the only thing that they had,
was
or
strategy.
the only thing that they could use to strategize and sway the case
Right.
was just to have a mistrial because the odds were stacked against them.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yes.
So let's move on because time is moving on, and we've said enough on that one. There's a third case we have not talked about as nearly as much, and I think this one is a very sad case that is just starting at this point as well. Don't know as much about it yet, but Casey Goodman Jr. was a young man in, I believe, Ohio. That's not. I wanted to come back to that. I want to start with this. Casey Goodman Jr., young man in Ohio. I don't know how old he was. Relatively young man, clearly. And he was out on the street, and there was some kind of event that the police were doing. They were surveying near his house. Had nothing to do with him.
Nothing.
It was in his area, and so there were police that were out observing and checking for certain things. They saw this particular police officer saw him come through the area, and he noticed that he had a gun on him. Now he says he had the gun out. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, right? And so he began to pursue him. Now he began to pursue him, first of all, because he had a gun out. The worst case scenario in that should have been, hey, do you have a permit for that gun?
Right.
Right? If he was not pointing it in a threatening way.
Exactly.
If he happened to have it, okay, and that was what I was going to show. He wasn't hiding or ashamed of the fact that he dealt with guns.
And he was licensed.
And that's the point.
He was
had a
licensed
to have a concealed weapon.
Yes.
So here you go. He's got a concealed weapon, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
He's licensed to have it. And so he's out on the street and he has his gun on him. If you can have it concealed, I don't know specifically what the laws are about taking it out, but I'm assuming if he wasn't holding it in any threatening manner,
right,
a policeman has a right to come up and ask you, hey, do you have a license for that gun?
Right.
But this escalates into him trying to get him to stop, and he's like, I ain't stopping, right? So he follows him. He follows him all the way to his house.
To his grandmother's house.
They get there, and then he's trying to get him to stop. And he's claiming that this guy, has this gun in a threatening manner, and so he has to shoot him. He's holding a bunch of Subway sandwiches. The evidence is that the Subway sandwiches are right there on the ground, right with them. And so he's
Skittles and iced tea. I'm sorry, I had to say that.
Come back.
Okay.
Y'all don't understand. But he's basically saying he's got a handful of Subway sandwiches, a whole bag full of them, and he's got a gun in another hand. And again, an officer coming up behind him, threatening him. Now, this young man has nothing to do with what's going on down the street around the corner.
Exactly.
And they're looking for people down the street around the corner. We got that, understand that, right? And he sees him come through this neighborhood, so the policeman follows him. I get that, right? Because obviously something else was going on there. They were looking for somebody. They see him. He's got a gun. They want to check this out. Check it out, right? But to treat him and assume him as the position of a criminal,
right,
is a problem.
It's problematic.
Versus, hey son, what's happened with you? I see you with a gun there. Are you, first of all, are you licensed to carry that gun?
Right.
But there's some things going on over here. I'm sure they would have had some questions.
Right.
Because of what's going on over here. Explain. There's some stuff going on over here. We need to talk about this. If somebody, a young man in this situation, ignores the policeman, they're putting themselves in danger. No question. It is what it is. If they ignore him and if they refuse to cooperate with him, they're immediately putting themselves in danger because now they're going to fight. They're going to fight fire with fire. They're going to oppose force with equal or greater force.
Right.
That's the way the
Like,
police department
that's
works.
the way that,
So if you
yes.
resist what they're saying for you, then they're coming at you stronger. They're not going to just back off. So that move just doesn't work to say, I'm ignoring, I'm going in my house, I didn't do nothing. We saw another guy, I forget his name, not too long ago, who refused to do what the police said. He was getting in his car. And he's getting in his car regardless of what they said. Guess what? They're not going to let you just get in the car. So they ended up shooting him. He ended up paralyzed. Right? So on the one hand, you have to understand that is not going to work. To just say, I refuse, I didn't do nothing wrong. We've seen it how many times now? I didn't do anything wrong, so I'm not stopping. You can't stop me. Well, they can stop you, and they will stop you, right or wrong. They're going to stop you. They're not just going to let you walk away from that.
No, they're not.
So I mean,
and that's actually wrong, and it's also harassment.
it can be.
It can
Certainly.
be.
It can be.
It can be
But-
because he was doing nothing wrong. It is an abuse of power
But he was in an area
where there was a
where
situation.
things were going on. There was a situation with somebody with guns, right? And so from that vantage point, I think it's totally reasonable that the police officer would investigate.
Okay, investigate, yes, but shoot him in the back.
That's a whole nother story.
Shoot him in the
That's a whole
back
nother extremity.
when he's not threatening anyone.
So apparently he resisted. He was going to go in anyway. The man shoots him once on the side, 5 times in the back.
That's excessive
You know,
force.
well, what happens though is when they pull, once that trigger's pulled, there's no pulling back.
Oh, they're trigger happy.
once-
Bam, bam, bam,
no, it's
bam,
not
bam.
even just
5
a matter
times.
of being trigger happy. It's a matter of you don't shoot just to warn somebody. You
You
don't
shoot- they shoot-
somebody, especially when they have a gun.
No, they
They're
shoot to kill.
You're shooting. If I'm shooting to kill. That's the way that rule works. If I'm gonna shoot, I'm shooting to kill.
Well, that's not a good rule.
I'm not shooting one time.
And
not
that's what
shooting you
we-
like the Cowboys in the leg or in the hand. I'm not shooting the gun out of your hand.
Do we go back to the issue where the police training needs to be revised?
I don't know if that one will be revised, because if a gunfire has started, right? If gunfire has started, you don't want to leave that person with the opportunity to turn and fire back. And so for their protection, for the protection of people around them, their training is, if you start shooting, it is shoot to kill. It is not shoot to lane.
But
It is
he
not
was
shoot
the
to
guy.
warn.
The officer was actually wrong.
I'm not saying he should have shot.
But I understand what
But
you're
I'm
saying.
saying when the shooting starts, it's going to be shoot to kill, right?
The guy didn't shoot. So this is why the officer is actually.
Well, that's why they're
He's
investigating. This is why there's a
investigating.
case now. And again, this has gone on for a while, but now charges have just been brought to him.
Exactly.
Now we will hear more of this and the sides of the story, et cetera, so forth, of how it got there. But it's always questionable when somebody gets shot multiple times in the back, right?
Right.
And in this case, the indication if he got shot in the side, he was pulling and turning away, then he wasn't this threat. Mm-hmm. If he's turning and walking away, there's not an imminent threat there, right? If I'm standing here and you shoot me in front, okay, there's a possibility
yes.
that I was a direct threat to you.
Exactly.
But the fact that I'm walking in my house with a gun does not mean I'm a threat to you.
Right.
Right? It means that I may be not obeying your instructions. But then I'm going to call for backup. Look, we got a guy here. He went in his house. And they get into you can get all kind of logic. Well, he was going in with a gun. He might have shot his family. Look, this is his house. He ain't just going in and shoot people. Call for backup. Do what you got to do. But they don't want to end up in a standoff position either.
Yes.
So there's I don't, first of all, envy any cop, because there's 100 things going through your mind in a very rapid pace, and you have to make decisions. Sometimes those decisions are going to be bad ones. They're going to not be the best one. And the system has always favored the cop in that, the policeman in that, to say, look, they may make a wrong mistake. At the same time, if they're doing it in their best effort to do their job, then the system has always favored to the favor of the
police.
policeman.
It has.
As part of doing that job. And as that has started to erode over the past
Exactly.
couple of years,
That
now
is
policemen
changing.
But now policemen are saying, look, do I really want to be a policeman?
Right. And they are starting to be held accountable.
But think about it. You could do this job for 25, 30 years, make one bad judgment call,
yes.
and now you're in jail for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Who wants a job like that?
Who wants that?
So, I don't necessarily envy the police in that situation having to try and make those kind of decisions either. And so, this is a case that we'll be seeing more of as time goes on. We'll get a chance to hear more of both sides of the story. We'll see what happens, and we'll follow it as we go. So time is almost wound up. There's a lot here. The thing I did want to say about this, the idea, again, we said this earlier, of someone now having a gun on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
The concern that I have, and there was a picture I had and I lost, unfortunately I couldn't bring it, is now you have people with guns resisting against people with guns.
Yeah.
And so just like this, him being on the street with a gun did not make him any safer. It actually caused him to be even more of a threat in the right circumstances. The idea that, look, it's getting so dangerous out there, I'm going to have to get me a gun and go out, just like we saw with Kyle, just like we see here, it can actually escalate the situation. And so where there wouldn't have been a situation now, because you got a gun and they got a gun and y'all looking at each other, okay, the temptation is who's going to shoot first. And so now the danger of that is you have all kind of people on the street scared of each other and scared of police officers, and everybody's now deciding who's going to shoot first. And that could be a complete massacre in terms of what it means to people over the course of time.
Yes.
So our time is just about running out. I do want to remind people, COVID is coming back again. We wanted to talk a little bit about Omicron. We didn't get there, but we have actually a vast majority of the people in the United States now vaccinated.
Yes.
They haven't mentioned that much because they still want 100%. They don't want to get people too comfortable. But between the number of people I suspect that have had COVID and the number of people who have been vaccinated, you can expect that the vast majority of this country has been exposed to the virus by now. At the same time, this virus, oh, he's a bad guy. No, Genova, you weren't a bad guy. This is what it's all about. Sometimes you got to let it roll.
That's what we're here for. Express yourself.
Look, you see what I'm dealing with,
you
right?
Express yourself.
It ain't like we don't get amped up, right?
Yes,
and we don't always agree either, and that's okay.
Yes,
it's about
that's what conversation is
getting
about. That's all right.
But with COVID still going on, what we're seeing is a reality that this is not just going to go away.
Yes.
That it's just too much out of the bottle now. It's in so many areas. It has too many opportunities to continue to make new variants, just like the flu. Its behavior is just like the flu.
Yes.
The flu makes variants all the time, which is why they keep wanting you to do flu shots every year. And what they do in the flu shot is it changes every year based on new variants that they have found. It's an older technology. It's not as effective because the variants that they're changing are typically from 2 years prior. So think about if COVID had 2 years of variants before they got a new virus out, how many different potential avenues of exposure there would be. The difference in this science is that it can respond very quickly. They're talking about for a specific variant, they can come up with a new virus specific to it in 3 months. That's a huge difference. It's a huge advantage.
Yes.
Part of the thing that frustrates me personally in this is that there has been this represents such an advancement in our capabilities in science. We have been taking vaccines that we have known nothing about for decades.
Right, exactly.
This is an advancement in our ability to make vaccines, but it's got such negative press that it has people scared and freaked out and afraid, et cetera, so forth and so on. And I grant it, we don't understand everything about the long-term potential impacts of it, but we do understand the impact of vaccines. And the pro versus con of that, at least what we know. We don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
And the real bottom line is the immediate risk versus long term. We can say, okay, I'm just going to go through this and huff it out and ignore it and just try and deal with it on my own. But these viruses at this point are everywhere. Here in this area, they're coming back again. They're surging. We have a 10% positivity rate in our community now, which means 10% of the people who are being tested are testing positive, and the number of people who are going into the hospitals are increasing. This is a reality.
It is.
Right? And we're playing with not only our lives, but the lives of people around us. So
yes.
All I can say is this is not going away, and it doesn't appear like it's going to go away anytime soon. And the stakes are high.
Yes.
And they're much higher than flu. I mean, I haven't gotten a flu shot in years because the risk of getting the flu for me is not that severe. If I get it, I typically work those things off pretty easily. I end up working through them. I don't end up down for 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
It's just because of my metabolism at this point in my life, right? So that risk to me is not worth the potential impacts of the vaccine. At the same time, the risk factor in COVID is significantly higher. And so that changes and reweighs that decision of taking the vaccine now and the risk versus what could show up in 20 years from now. So we have many, many things to think about this. And I do encourage people to continue to think about it carefully and wisely. And at that point, at this point, I just want to, thank everybody who's here with us on the show. Thank you, Genovo. We're glad to have you. Heather, we're glad to have you. Don't forget to tell somebody about it. Don't forget to share it with somebody. Those of you who watch this overnight or in the future, hope this has been an inspiration to you. We do look forward to connecting back up with you again. We'll be back next Saturday.
Yes.
We almost promise we will be back next Saturday. Lord willing, how's that? We'll be back next Saturday, and we'll have more to talk about. We'll go into some more things. So join us next Saturday. Join us tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be continuing on to with this series that we've been doing on Sunday mornings about Get Your Life Back.
Yes.
We're talking about
Get Your Faith Back.
Faith back, and we're talking about dominion, living in dominion, trusting in God, walking in faith tomorrow specifically. So join us for that tomorrow, 11:30. We'll be on, or come and check us out. We are still connecting live on Sundays. We have a congregation coming in. You can come and be a part of it. 11:30. We got space for you. We're ready to host you and look forward to having a great time with you.
Yes, and we are wearing masks.
And we're definitely wearing masks, sanitizing, and all kind of stuff like that as well. So connect up. You will not regret the atmosphere of being joined together, and your spirit needs it. And we invite you to come and join with us in that. All right? Okay, everybody. Y'all have a good night. More to come in the future. We'll be looking forward to telling you and seeing you and talking about it. All right? Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.